Muscle does not disappear overnight. It fades quietly, like a language we stop speaking, until one day we realize we can no longer lift what once felt light or rise from a chair without effort. The most dangerous habit that accelerates this fading is not dramatic, not loud, not even painful. It is prolonged inactivity, the quiet surrender to sitting, the gradual withdrawal from movement that tells the body it is no longer needed. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength, is often blamed on the passage of time, but time alone is not the executioner. Biology responds to signals, and the most powerful signal muscle tissue receives is mechanical tension. When we move, when we stand, carry, climb, stretch, muscle fibers are stimulated to repair and rebuild. When we stop moving, the body interprets that stillness as instruction. It begins to conserve energy. It reduces protein synthesis. It dismantles fibers that seem unnecessary. Muscle is metabolically expensive tissue, and the body, ever efficient, will not maintain what it believes is unused. With aging, this process becomes more sensitive. The machinery that builds muscle, the pathways that translate dietary protein into new tissue, becomes less responsive. This phenomenon, often described as anabolic resistance, means that older adults require stronger signals to maintain the same muscle mass they once held effortlessly. Yet modern life often provides the opposite signal. Hours spent sitting, days structured around convenience, technology replacing physical effort, these patterns whisper to the body that strength is optional. Inside the muscle fiber, inactivity shifts a delicate balance. Protein breakdown begins to exceed protein synthesis. Mitochondria, the energy-producing structures within cells, become less efficient. Insulin sensitivity declines, reducing the muscle's ability to absorb glucose and amino acids from the bloodstream. Inflammatory markers may rise subtly, further interfering with repair mechanisms. Over time, fibers shrink. Fast-twitch fibers, responsible for power and quick reactions, are particularly vulnerable. Their loss is not merely cosmetic. It increases fall risk, reduces independence, and alters metabolic health. What makes prolonged inactivity especially destructive is its invisibility. It does not announce itself as a disease. It feels comfortable. Sitting requires no courage, no preparation, no recovery. Yet every hour of immobility reduces muscle protein synthesis. The body adapts quickly to stillness. Even short periods of bed rest in older adults can lead to measurable declines in strength. The muscle, deprived of challenge, interprets silence as redundancy. There is also a neurological dimension. Muscle strength is not only about fiber size, but about communication between brain and muscle. Movement reinforces neural pathways. When we practice standing, balancing, lifting, we refine coordination and preserve motor units, the connections that allow precise contraction. Inactivity weakens these connections. The brain's map of the body becomes less detailed, less responsive. Sarcopenia, then, is not just loss of tissue, it is loss of dialogue between intention and action. Nutrition plays a role, of course. Adequate protein intake becomes increasingly important with age, but even perfect nutrition cannot fully compensate for absence of movement. Protein without stimulus is like bricks without construction. The body needs both material and message. Resistance, even modest resistance, tells muscle that it is required for survival. Walking, climbing stairs, carrying groceries, practicing controlled strength exercises, these acts are biological affirmations. They declare to the body that strength still matters. There is something deeply philosophical in this exchange. The body is always listening. It listens to what we ask of it.
If we ask little, it becomes little. If we ask thoughtfully, consistently, it responds with adaptation. Aging does not eliminate this responsiveness, it simply demands clearer signals. To understand the worst habit that devours muscle in older adults is to recognize how quietly it operates. It is the habit of choosing comfort over challenge, of allowing chairs to replace legs, of permitting days to pass without meaningful movement. Yet every hour of immobility reduces muscle protein synthesis. The body adapts quickly to stillness. Even short periods of bed rest in older adults can lead to measurable declines in strength. The muscle, deprived of challenge, interprets silence as redundancy. There is also a neurological dimension. Muscle strength is not only about fiber size, but about communication between brain and muscle. Movement reinforces neural pathways. When we practice standing, balancing, lifting, we refine coordination and preserve motor units, the connections that allow precise contraction. Inactivity weakens these connections. The brain's map of the body becomes less detailed, less responsive. Sarcopenia, then, is not just loss of tissue, it is loss of dialogue between intention and action. Nutrition plays a role, of course. Adequate protein intake becomes increasingly important with age, but even perfect nutrition cannot fully compensate for absence of movement. Protein without stimulus is like bricks without construction. The body needs both material and message. Resistance, even modest resistance, tells muscle that it is required for survival. Walking, climbing stairs, carrying groceries, practicing controlled strength exercises, these acts are biological affirmations. They declare to the body that strength still matters. There is something deeply philosophical in this exchange. The body is always listening. It listens to what we ask of it. If we ask little, it becomes little. If we ask thoughtfully, consistently, it responds with adaptation. Aging does not eliminate this responsiveness, it simply demands clearer signals. To understand the worst habit that devours muscle in older adults is to recognize how quietly it operates. It is the habit of choosing comfort over challenge, of allowing chairs to replace legs, of permitting days to pass without meaningful movement. Yet every hour of immobility reduces muscle protein synthesis. The body adapts quickly to stillness. Even short periods of bed rest in older adults can lead to measurable declines in strength. The muscle, deprived of challenge, interprets silence as redundancy. Muscle loss in older adults does not occur as a sudden event, but as a gradual, almost imperceptible process that reflects the body's response to environmental signals. The most significant contributor to this decline, often overlooked, is prolonged inactivity. Unlike dramatic injuries or acute illnesses, inactivity quietly communicates to the body that certain tissues are no longer necessary, and muscle, being metabolically expensive to maintain, is one of the first systems affected. Muscle fibers thrive on mechanical stimulation, the tension created when we lift, carry, push, or even walk. This stimulation triggers cellular pathways that promote protein synthesis, repair damaged fibers, and maintain overall structural integrity. Without these signals, the body interprets inactivity as a cue to conserve energy, initiating a slow dismantling of muscle tissue that is perceived as expendable. Over time, the cumulative effect of prolonged stillness becomes evident as weakness, reduced endurance, and diminished functional capacity. Yet the process is subtle enough that it often goes unnoticed until it begins to interfere with daily activities. The biological mechanisms behind this are precise and efficient. When muscles are engaged, cells activate signaling pathways, such as the mTOR pathway, which promotes protein synthesis and growth. Mechanical tension and metabolic stress signal the body that these fibers are required for survival. In contrast, during extended periods of inactivity, these pathways become less active and catabolic processes that break down protein begin to dominate. The result is a net loss of muscle mass, first affecting fast-twitch fibers that are crucial for power and rapid movements, and gradually extending to slow-twitch fibers that support endurance and postural stability. This process is further exacerbated in older adults whose regenerative capacity naturally declines, making each day of inactivity more impactful than it would be in younger individuals. In addition to structural decline, inactivity affects the metabolic function of muscle tissue. Muscle is not only responsible for movement, but also for regulating blood sugar, producing heat, and supporting overall metabolism.
Muscle tissue is highly adaptive, responding not to age alone, but to the demands placed upon it. When movement is absent or severely limited, the body receives a clear signal that muscle is no longer necessary, and it begins a slow process of dismantling what it considers expendable. Protein synthesis, the mechanism by which the body builds and repairs muscle fibers, becomes less active, while protein breakdown gradually dominates. This imbalance leads to a net loss of muscle mass over time, and the effects are particularly pronounced in older adults, whose regenerative capacity naturally diminishes with age. The metabolic cost of maintaining muscle tissue is significant, and the body prioritizes energy efficiency. When muscles are unused, the body interprets this as an opportunity to conserve resources, reallocating them to systems it perceives as more essential for survival. The result is not only a loss of strength, but also a reduction in functional mobility, making daily tasks more difficult and increasing the risk of falls, injury, and loss of independence. The degradation of muscle fibers begins at the cellular level, where both fast-twitch and slow-twitch fibers are affected, though fast-twitch fibers are particularly vulnerable. These fibers, responsible for rapid and powerful movements, shrink first because they are metabolically expensive and are no longer stimulated by activity. The absence of tension and contraction prevents the activation of signaling pathways that maintain fiber size, such as the mTOR pathway, and suppresses anabolic hormones like testosterone and growth hormone, which are critical for maintaining muscle mass. As a result, even if a person continues to consume adequate protein, the body's ability to use those amino acids for muscle repair is diminished because the mechanical and metabolic signals necessary to trigger protein synthesis are absent. Nutrition alone cannot compensate for the lack of movement. The body needs both raw materials and demand signals to preserve tissue. Inactivity also disrupts the intricate connection between muscles and other organ systems. Muscles act as a primary site for glucose disposal, playing a crucial role in regulating blood sugar and overall metabolic health. When muscle tissue shrinks, insulin sensitivity decreases, leading to impaired glucose uptake and higher circulating blood sugar levels. This not only increases the risk of metabolic disorders such as type 2 diabetes, but also contributes to a state of chronic low-grade inflammation, which further accelerates muscle breakdown. The endocrine system is affected as well. Decreased muscle mass reduces the secretion of myokines, signaling proteins released by muscle fibers that communicate with other tissues, modulating inflammation and supporting cardiovascular and bone health. In this way, inactivity initiates a cascade of biological consequences that extend far beyond the muscles themselves, influencing systemic health and resilience. Neurological factors are also involved. Muscle strength depends on the efficient communication between nerves and fibers, and inactivity weakens these neural connections over time. Motor units, the functional units that allow the nervous system to activate muscle fibers, decrease in number and efficiency, resulting in slower, weaker, and less coordinated movements. Even minimal physical challenges become more difficult because the nervous system has adapted to the absence of demand. This demonstrates that muscle loss is not merely a matter of tissue size, but a reduction in functional capacity and neural integration. Ultimately, the body operates under the principle of use it or lose it. Muscle responds to the signals it receives, and inactivity provides a signal of redundancy. Strength, endurance, coordination, and metabolic function all decline in response to this absence of demand. Recognizing that muscle follows biological need highlights the importance of consistent, purposeful movement as a preventative and restorative measure. Without stimulation, the body's natural mechanisms prioritize energy conservation over maintenance, accelerating the dismantling of muscle fibers and compromising long-term health and independence in older adults. As the body ages, maintaining muscle mass and strength becomes increasingly challenging, not because the body is incapable, but because the mechanisms that build and repair muscle become less responsive. This phenomenon, often referred to as anabolic resistance, means that older adults require stronger and more consistent stimuli to achieve the same muscle-preserving effects that younger individuals experience with relative ease. In younger muscles, protein synthesis is efficiently triggered by everyday movement and moderate protein intake, but in aging muscles, these signals are blunted, creating a need for more deliberate and frequent engagement to maintain structural integrity. Resistance activity, weight-bearing exercises, and higher protein consumption become critical because they provide the necessary cues to activate the signaling pathways responsible for muscle repair and growth. Without these intensified stimuli, the balance shifts towards catabolism, where protein breakdown exceeds synthesis, resulting in gradual but inevitable loss of mass and strength. Anabolic resistance is closely tied to changes at the cellular level. Muscle fibers in older adults respond less robustly to amino acids, the building blocks of protein, and the efficiency of nutrient uptake is reduced. Hormonal changes, including declines in growth hormone, testosterone, and insulin-like growth factor 1, further dampen the body's ability to stimulate muscle synthesis. Even when older adults consume adequate protein, the body may not use it effectively without concurrent mechanical stimulation from activity. This combination of diminished nutrient responsiveness and lower hormonal signaling creates a situation where muscles are biologically less sensitive to the cues necessary for maintenance, making inactivity especially destructive. Each day without purposeful engagement accelerates sarcopenia, highlighting the importance of intentional and structured physical activity that challenges the muscles sufficiently to overcome this resistance. The type and intensity of activity play a critical role in counteracting anabolic resistance. Resistance training, including weightlifting, body weight exercises, and elastic band workouts, generates mechanical tension that directly stimulates protein synthesis pathways. Compound movements that recruit multiple muscle groups provide a more potent stimulus than isolated exercises because they demand greater neural activation and coordination. Even small increments of progressive overload, where resistance or volume is gradually increased, can significantly improve muscle responsiveness in older adults. Beyond structural benefits, these activities enhance neuromuscular efficiency, reinforcing the brain-muscle connection and improving functional mobility. Daily movement that challenges strength, balance, and coordination sends a clear biological message that the muscles remain necessary, counteracting the natural decline in anabolic sensitivity that occurs with age. Nutrition complements this approach by providing the raw materials required for repair, but timing and quality matter. Protein intake rich in essential amino acids, particularly leucine, is critical to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis in older adults. Consuming protein in proximity to resistance activity amplifies the anabolic response, effectively signaling the body to allocate resources to muscle repair rather than allowing catabolic processes to dominate.
Adequate micronutrients, including vitamin D, magnesium, and omega-3 fatty acids, support hormonal regulation, mitochondrial efficiency, and anti-inflammatory mechanisms, which are all essential for overcoming anabolic resistance. Understanding anabolic resistance reframes the approach to aging and strength. It is not simply that muscles deteriorate with time, rather they require deliberate, stronger, and more consistent signals to maintain their mass and function. Older adults cannot rely solely on casual movement or standard nutrition to preserve muscle. Instead, they must engage in structured resistance activity, consume targeted nutrients, and maintain consistent patterns of stimulation to counteract the blunted responsiveness of their aging muscles. Recognizing and addressing anabolic resistance empowers older individuals to take control of their physical health, maintain independence, and slow the progression of sarcopenia through intentional and science-backed strategies.
Muscle strength is not solely a measure of tissue size. It is the product of intricate communication between the nervous system and muscle fibers, a dialogue that orchestrates movement, balance, and coordination. Inactivity not only diminishes the physical mass of muscles, but also disrupts this essential neural connection, weakening the functional capacity of the body over time. Each muscle fiber is controlled by motor neurons, which transmit electrical signals from the brain to initiate contraction. When movement becomes infrequent or absent, these neural pathways lose efficiency. Motor units, the functional units consisting of a motor neuron and the fibers it innervates, shrink in number and responsiveness, reducing the precision and power of muscular contractions. The result is a decline not only in strength, but also in speed, coordination, and the ability to react to sudden changes in posture or environment, which are critical for preventing falls and maintaining independence. Neurological decline associated with inactivity begins subtly. Even small reductions in voluntary movement cause the nervous system to adapt by down-regulating the recruitment of motor units. This adaptation, while energetically efficient, compromises functional capacity. Fast-twitch fibers, which are responsible for explosive movements and rapid adjustments, are particularly affected. As these fibers weaken and their neural control diminishes, older adults may find themselves slower to respond, less stable during balance challenges, and increasingly reliant on support. This loss is compounded by changes in proprioception, the body's sense of position in space, which depends on continuous feedback between muscles, tendons, and the nervous system. Inactivity diminishes this feedback loop, reducing coordination and making everyday movements more effortful and risk-laden. The consequences of weakened neuromuscular communication extend beyond mobility. Muscle serves as an endocrine organ, releasing myokines that influence systemic inflammation, metabolism, and overall organ function. When neural stimulation declines, muscle activity decreases, reducing the secretion of these beneficial signaling molecules. This can contribute to chronic low-grade inflammation, impaired glucose regulation, and diminished cardiovascular efficiency, creating a cascade of effects that accelerate age-related decline. The interplay between neural activity and muscle health highlights that strength is not merely structural but also functional. It depends on the integration of multiple systems that are all sensitive to disuse. Functional loss due to inactivity often manifests before visible atrophy is detected. An older adult may appear to have adequate muscle mass but exhibit slower walking speed, reduced grip strength, or difficulty rising from a chair. These functional declines reflect neural compromise rather than purely muscular degradation. Consistent movement, particularly activities that challenge balance, coordination, and resistance, reinforces these neural pathways. Repeated activation of motor units maintains synaptic efficiency, preserves motor neuron health, and strengthens the connection between intention and movement. Activities such as squats, stair climbing, resistance band exercises, and controlled balance training provide mechanical and neural stimulation simultaneously, ensuring that muscles remain responsive not only in size but in function. Understanding the neural dimension of sarcopenia emphasizes that inactivity harms both structure and communication. Muscle loss is not simply a matter of shrinking fibers, it represents a breakdown in the dialogue between the brain and the body. Maintaining functional strength requires ongoing engagement, where movement signals purpose, necessity, and survival to both muscle tissue and the nervous system. Without this connection, the body gradually loses its ability to coordinate, respond, and generate force, leaving older adults vulnerable to injury, falls, and diminished independence. By fostering both muscular and neural activity, it is possible to preserve functional capacity, demonstrating that strength is as much about communication as it is about tissue. The act of movement is more than a mechanical exercise. It is a biological signal that informs the body of purpose and necessity. When older adults engage in regular physical activity, even at moderate intensity, they are sending a message to their muscles, nervous system, and metabolic networks that strength, endurance, and coordination remain essential. Precision in this movement, targeted resistance, and consistent activation of muscles can profoundly counteract the natural decline in tissue and function that occurs with age. Sarcopenia, while often attributed to time, is in large part a response to absence of challenge. The body is highly adaptive. It maintains what is needed and removes what is not. This principle underscores that targeted, intelligent movement and the accompanying nutrient support can outperform periods of neglect or extreme deprivation. Exercise stimulates muscle protein synthesis, activates motor units, improves neuromuscular communication, and enhances metabolic efficiency, creating a comprehensive signal that muscle is still required for survival. Resistance activity, whether through weights, bands, or bodyweight exercises, provides a precise stimulus that engages both slow-twitch and fast-twitch fibers. Fast-twitch fibers, which are responsible for explosive power and quick reaction, are particularly vulnerable in older adults, but are also highly responsive to targeted activation. Engaging these fibers regularly reinforces the neural pathways that control them, maintaining strength and coordination while slowing their atrophy. Slow-twitch fibers, responsible for endurance and postural control, also benefit from repeated, controlled movement. Each contraction, every controlled repetition is interpreted by the body as necessity for function. When combined with proper nutrition, particularly sufficient high-quality protein and essential amino acids, the muscle receives both the raw materials and the biological signal to repair, grow, and maintain mass. This coordinated approach of targeted movement plus nutrition exemplifies the principle of precision nourishment. The neurological aspect of muscle maintenance is equally critical. Each movement reinforces the communication between brain and muscle, strengthening motor units and enhancing proprioception, the body's awareness of spatial positioning. Inactivity reduces this reinforcement, resulting in slower, weaker, and less coordinated movements. Precision exercise ensures that the brain remains actively engaged with the body, maintaining motor control, reaction time, and balance. This dual effect on both tissue and neural pathways is why intelligent, structured activity can surpass the benefits of extreme interventions, such as fasting or sporadic high-intensity exercise. The body requires consistent, meaningful engagement to maintain its systems, particularly after age 60, when regenerative processes naturally slow. Beyond strength and coordination, targeted movement has systemic benefits. Muscle tissue influences metabolic health, hormone regulation, and inflammatory responses. Regular activity stimulates the release of myokines that communicate with other organs to modulate insulin sensitivity, reduce chronic inflammation, and support cardiovascular function. By maintaining active muscle, the body remains metabolically responsive, improving energy utilization, protecting against chronic disease, and preserving independence.
The interplay between mechanical stimulus, nutrient availability, and systemic signaling illustrates that the worst outcomes are not caused by aging itself, but by the absence of intentional engagement. Precision, consistency, and targeted action are the antidote to sarcopenia. By understanding that muscle is adaptive, responsive, and dependent on demand, older adults can actively counter the silent degradation caused by inactivity. Every deliberate movement communicates necessity. Every protein-rich meal reinforces repair, and together they create an environment in which muscle is preserved, neural connections are maintained, and overall resilience is strengthened. This principle demonstrates that intelligent, structured approaches to muscle preservation can achieve more than extreme deprivation or neglect, allowing older adults to maintain strength, mobility, and independence well into advanced age.